You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
All right, guys. Well, I'm very, very excited to be here and show you guys a really cool real-time mocap setup that I've been working on that I think has a lot of potential for bringing virtual characters to life in a very easy way. And so to help us out with that, I got Maniacal here. He's one of the wild and crazy immortal babies from our up-and-coming game called Babylon. Now, this setup's based on 4 pieces of off-the-shelf technology, all working together in real time to create everything that you're seeing right here. So we got an iPhone 10 strapped to a $40 paintball helmet. That's doing all the face capture. We got this really cool inertia-based full-body mocap suit by X.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, this is Mike Balzer of All Things 3D, and let me turn that down a little bit. I'm hearing echo. This is 3D in review for September 14, 2018, and what I've got playing behind me is a SIGGRAPH 2018 up in Vancouver. This is an award given for the best, what do you want to call it, real-time live event, and this is the group, let's see, Kite and Lightning. I've mentioned them before, but one of the things that they've done, as you can see, the guy is basically acting out on screen, and his motion, not only his facial capture, but his body motion is being translated to the baby character, which I guess is going to be coming up in an upcoming game, live. And as you can see, it's extremely dynamic. But what's more important is that the facial capture is actually being done by the iPhone 10 using the capture camera that we've talked about before, very similar to the Kinect. The company PrimeSense is the main inventor behind it. Apple acquired them, and now we're actually seeing some useful purposes of it other than just be able to use it to open up your iPhone. And as you can see, it's extremely fluid. Now, there are some other components involved in this. There's a company, I think it's Ikinema, that was used to provide the live events directly into Unreal. And also, there's another company that if you read this shirt there, and I can't read it from where I'm at, but essentially they provide the, the motion capture sensors. And what they are like IMUs strapped to your body that send information back to a main system, and it provides joint control. And as you can see, it's very fluid. Now, of course, it's not cheap, and there may be other alternatives that we'll talk about next week. But I thought this was just really great and really excited about it. And I've reached out to them, hopefully to do an interview, as well as maybe get this application they're working on. Hopefully they will release it to the Apple market as an app. There are a couple of other applications out there, but I still think it's extremely fun and exciting. And yeah, look forward to more information. As you can see there, as you mentioned in the beginning, it's just a cheap headset, kind of like what I use with my Neo DVR setup, and a bracket that comes down with the camera. So as you can see, exciting, and he's dynamically set up. Players in the back, they're things he probably recorded earlier because obviously their motions are different, kind of like what I did with that little Vince demo. If you go out to YouTube, my channel, you'll see it. Okay, well, let's move on to the next item then. There we go, my main camera. And hey, everybody. So hopefully you're okay with the audio. I've decided, since my dynamic mic that I was using, you had to be very close to it. I found that if I move my head even, let's say 6 to 12 inches, I would get a depreciation in the audio. So I've gone with a lavalier. This is a a cardioid mic, so the pattern should be a little better. I do notice that there's a little more noise from the system that I have. I have a PC that runs this whole streaming system. So if the audio is not as good, I apologize, but it should be at least the same level throughout. That way I can move around and do some of the demos that I've had problems keeping the volume up while I move around my desk area. Okay, well, let's get into the main item today, and that is, and I'll bring up Mac Rumors because it's funny, they kind of did a whole article and I wasn't even aware of it until I did some research on it, of all the items I wanted to discuss. And the main title, if you remember, is Why Apple Matters for AR Survival. Now, some of you might like what Magically presented to the market. Yes, of course, it's a developer unit, but I felt it was underwhelming. I didn't really think there was any great or new technology there. They didn't really make any leaps that I thought were significant upon what Microsoft had worked on. And the thing is that there are a lot of other components to AR besides just the lenses. And the thing that I think is that Apple has made a lot of acquisitions, and MacRumor did a good job of actually going through all the ones that I also looked up, and there's a Wikipedia of all their acquisitions, but I wanted to take the ones that really mattered. And so I'll kind of go through their article, and then if there's something that they missed, I'll go ahead and go back to it. But they talk about the rumors, and then they talk about the acquisitions, and obviously there's some other stuff in there that you can go ahead and read. But they get down into the acquisitions down here. And the most recent one, and I talked about it last week, was the Oconia Holographics company that actually develops lenses and a certain waveguide system based upon holographic reflection. And what this allows is very thin lenses, because essentially if you've, and I've seen this before, you can actually kind of generate the optical properties of a lens just through holography. And this has been used before that I've read. And they also do something like that here, which allows them not only to create a lens system, but they can also create these wave conduits or waveguides that, if you know, both Microsoft and Magically have been working with. So with that being the case, if we can create these through a holographic technique and shrink or minimize the size, and as they identified, if you go out and read their links, that it doesn't diminish the color, they're bright, and obviously this is a great importance if you're trying to project either a, let's say in the case of the other rumor on Apple, these 8K LCD panels that they're supposedly being made. Now, this is something that I have found out, but I'll get to that in a moment. Let's stay on this. So we have some lens systems here. They also bought a company called Vervana, and they had made a prototype demo unit that not only, what was unique here is that it was kind of a mixed reality, dual camera as well as projected LCD screen. So essentially it was VR, but two stereo cameras that were projected in the other world. And we've seen this done by other companies. One in case in point is Occipital, but another company that also moved forward with something like this was obviously Vervana. And let's see, there's a camera system, I can't think of it, Stereo Labs, I think is the name of it, that you can get an attachment for your Vive. But the problem is they're never going to be the quality of what you can see through transparent lenses because they're all diminished in resolution. So this gets us to the other, I wouldn't say acquisition, but I think they're actually doing their own research, are these 8K panels we heard back in April. This rumor that in 2020 they will have these 8K display panels, two of them, so that if you want to use Pimax's equivalent terminology, it'll be a 16K display. So if we have these, this gets us much closer to the resolution that we require to see things normally. And then if we add obviously 8K cameras in front of it, which have been around for some time, you'll be able to provide an image of the outside world projected into the cameras and have something that represents the outside world pretty cool. Now, even a low resolution version that we see from occipital, which I think was only like 1280 per eye, about 720p, the effect can be pretty stunning. And also, it allows us to do occlusion, other techniques that are much more difficult if you're just trying to run an image in front of you through these waveguides, which still provide a somewhat transparent. By using a technique like this, we literally can occlude it. Now, I've also read somewhere that there's another guy who's got a patent for using a technique, essentially another waveguide, or actually another liquid crystal panel that literally can turn off the display per pixel at the point of occlusion. So that would literally block out the outside world. So we're going to probably see some combinations of that. But that's very important. Now, something else that's not pointed out here is they also have positional tracking built into this. And one of the rumors was that they would have positional cameras like they have with the HTC Vive or the Oculus, but I don't think they'll probably go in that direction. Why? Because the next item here is the PrimeSense. We've talked about it. It's also the projection system, capture system that's used by the face capture system in the iPhone 10, and obviously they just brought out 3 new models, the 10s, and then I guess the 10s Plus. Well, they call it the 10s Max, that uses the same technique. So PrimeSense is very important there. One thing that some people thought that they would actually provide this on the back of the cameras. That was not the case, but that doesn't mean that's not going to happen in the future, and may actually be in the iPad that may be released later on. We'll see. But the whole point is they have a projection system that can be used for positional tracking, very much like occipital. And then we have the Mitea system, which is very important because they provide the AR kit functionality. A lot of people have mentioned that, but there are a few other things. And here's Phase Shift that provided the animation. So, you know, one of the things is that I went through and created a whole list, but they obviously did something in parallel. This flyby media is very interesting because they use visual anchors in order to allow you to move around an object and identify its, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Just basically allow labeling of an object. And then let's see, where else is there? It didn't show. So one of the companies, and I'll go ahead and bring it up from my notes, that I thought was very interesting was this, is it this one? Yeah, well, actually, yeah, I do believe this is it. So it was flyby, but they also provided what they call the IMU monocular slam, which is both common in the AR kit as well as the AR core. And with the two together, this is what we're seeing as far as being able to move around in an environment and actually track an object, move around it with fairly good stability for a single camera. Now imagine if you had stereo cameras, the opportunities there. Now, since they've been doing this for some time now, I have a feeling when we get to the actual AR lens system glasses that they'll use stereo slam, and it'll be a discrete chip because they've been working in that direction with a lot of discrete chips. Okay, so that's about it for that. Let's see what else that I want to mention. Oh, some of the other things that I thought was kind of neat is, and we haven't heard much about it. Let's see if I can find it. This was interesting, and this is from patently Apple, was this ability to literally use tracking within an internal environment. And they've actually bought 2 different companies to do this. And it was this particular, and then something called Wi-Fi Slam. Let's see if I can find that here. And by utilizing these 2 type of techniques, they can actually provide a location within an environment. So let's say you're in a museum, not only will you be able to go from one location to one location to another location by using cues in the museum, But you can also, by using things like Wi-Fi SLAM and the previous one that I mentioned, be able to know your geolocation within the museum or indoor. And by using a combination of these two, be able to track yourself so that you could literally have objects that pop up depending on your physical location inside these buildings. So these are all important pieces, and I think they're extremely something that we need to look at, because one, they've spent obviously a lot of money on it, but they also have manufacturing capability and research capability, and they're really starting to push forward. And one thing I didn't include in this was the, well, like I mentioned, these LCD panels, which I can't reveal my source, but this particular person asked me, do we know of Apple working on something? And I said, yeah, I've read several articles, but this person was in China, and a particular Chinese panel manufacturer had kind of bragged that they were working with a big company. And I guess the person I'm talking to also spoke about, oh, maybe it's Apple, and they were kind of stunned that they would possibly know. But they are working on a factory. That factory is supposed to start production in 2019 because of the delivery of these panels in 2020. And this all seems to make sense because one of the things that's in the rumors is this manufacturing plant for these panels. So, you know, I don't know if they'll actually have a full headset, but they probably will have some for development. And who knows? That's still, what, almost, yeah, it's 2 years from now. So we could see something significant in that 2-year period. Things kind of move along once you have all the fundamentals in place. And also keep in mind that they are going to be working on their own processors and looking at a unique way of creating a general or a graphics processor unit similar to the cores that are built into the NVIDIA chip. So there'll be some functionality there that we can use for such thing as SLAM calculations and other types of tracking by using the GPU for that kind of capability. Okay, well, that's about it for that. I think Apple, you know, I think it's going to have something pretty tremendous to start showing off in a year, year and a half. And by this time next year, or 2020, I think we'll see some significant inroads from Apple. And as we've known in the past, they kind of take a back seat, wait till everybody else puts out their stuff, and then kind of clean up, which, I mean, I guess if you're an Apple fan, that's great, but I think it's kind of sad that they can move back, but obviously they have spent time and money looking into this as well. All right, let's get into our news items. Some of the things from the past, if you've followed the show, Reallusion has been promoting something called Character Creator 3. If you look at one of my YouTube videos I just put out using Character Creator 2 and a few other components, some of the hallmarks of this, and I've got a video for that, which I'll go ahead and show. Here we go. So essentially, let me turn this down a little. So essentially what we're seeing now in this new version, which wasn't available in the previous version, are techniques and tools to be able to convert their characters into a character that you can immediately bring into a gaming engine. As you can see, they simplify the bone structure for animation. They simplify the mesh structure, triangulate it, and then have tools to actually bring it in. And here they show it being used in Unreal as well as in Unity. And then here they talk about the quads. And I'm just going to jump ahead. And then obviously textures. Then they also do texture atlasing. And then also the ability to bring in clothing and then reduce it so that, and I've seen this in other programs like Poser, that once you bring in clothing, it reduces the whole mesh so that all you have is the clothing and the underlying character and no extra mesh objects. And here they're showing your reductions. They will also provide, I can't think of the word right now, but multiple levels of character. Here we go. We're seeing different character levels, number of polygons as they're being reduced, the ability to immediately create normal mapping from a high detailed mesh, and then LODs, which is kind of cool. And then it can generate all these and bring them in, and you have full control over it. So it's not automatic as some game engines. So you have better control over it. And then here there's actually some demos, plus a first-person view with some high detailed hands. Let's see if they show. Yeah, there's a character. Yeah, and then here is a high detail animated character. And then using their own version of using the iPhone 10 animation system, they were able to blend. And I think they have a scene coming up here where they show, yeah, where the guy is actually using the iPhone 10, talking, and then it's being interpreted into the character. So I'm really excited. I think it's about $200 if you don't have a previous version, or about, I think it's $129 for the upgrade. So it really looks interesting. Sadly, let me jump back to my other screen. Sadly, it says it's going to be available in September, but they haven't even put it out for beta, and they are expecting you to pre-order. And if you pre-order, what's the pre-order special? It's $129 right now, and even if you log in as a member, it still seems to be the same price. So it could be a great little tool to work with. I'll talk about it more. What I find interesting, it will also include the Exchange pipeline, so I'll be able to import animations from other tools like Breckle. And then something else that I'm working on that I'll talk about a little bit more in the future, I think it's called iPyMotion, that I thought was a really great tool as well. But you can bring these into this, and I kind of skip having to use Motion Builder or Maya, both expensive tools, and I'm trying to find a very budget-oriented pipeline, and so we'll see how well this will work out in the future. Okay, on to that note, as I mentioned in my starting video, the company Kite and Lightning won the performance real-time for SIGGRAPH this year. Actually, I guess it was the first year it was run, and we ran a little bit of this. You can watch the whole thing. It's pretty cool. But if you've been following this guy, he's been putting out videos on YouTube as well as Twitter that shows kind of the evolution of his process. So he's developed it. Here's his little setup. As he said, it's like a $40 helmet with different, he may have actually cleaned this up a little bit, but these look familiar to me because I've been using GoPro tools for my own setup. And then he just locks it into place and then looks at the camera. He's wearing an X-Sense suit with their sensors on it, and doing full motion capture as well as facial capture. And what was cool is that he used the Unreal Engine as well as, let's see if they mention it here. I don't want to get the name wrong. Ikinema. It's a new tool called Live Action. It's like $2,500, so it's not cheap, but it allows you to bring it in. It does some calculations of movement on the fly, so all the movements are fluid and prevents you from like having your hand go through your body and things like that. So it looks like a very interesting product. I actually don't have 2,500 now or any real need to do animation like this, but I think it could be really cool for doing virtual sets where you're having to act in VR in a particular environment. So you can move around in it, move around objects and so forth, and then record this and then use this animation later instead of having to go back and change all your paths and that. And I played a little bit with it with the plugin for Unreal called Vive Mocap, and it works pretty cool. So I've asked them if they're going to provide this tool and also if the company I just mentioned, Ikinema, will have their tool that can be used with other applications. So I'll have more on that in the future. I've reached out to both of them if they wanted to come on and do an interview. So we'll see what happens with that. All right, moving on. Here's the Ikinema. And if you haven't worked with them before, they've had, I think, an indie version for some time, but 99 pounds, which I don't remember what the translates to, about $120 if I remember correctly, maybe a little more. And so you can buy this, or you can get a 14-day evaluation, and then obviously if you make more than 500,000 or below that, you can apply for free evaluations, but I think the cost is obviously much more than that. And in the past, we've also covered a product called Orion, which I kind of like. You can get a free day, 14-day trial, but if you've got HTC Vive trackers, it provides motion capture, and it actually worked pretty well. And you can bring this both into Unity and Unreal. So if you're working with the Unity gaming engine, it might be something to look at. Keep in mind that you do have to buy the trackers. I think the minimum that you require is 3 Vive trackers, your 2 hand controllers, and your headset. But obviously, if you wanted more accurate joint control, you'll have to buy it, $99 a pop for each of them. I've got up to 7 now. And then the actual cost of this is £400 for a one-time license. So it's not too bad. And so if you're looking into that and might want to go with the whole Ikinema pipeline, that might be something to look at. All right, let's move on into our first item in 3D technology. I thought this was very interesting. We have, I wouldn't say the first time, but it appears Volkswagen, is going to be using 3D printing for mass vehicle production. And one thing that I kind of saw that I thought was very interesting was these new HP actually metal fabricators, and we'll get into in a little bit about them. And then plus I have a pretty fun little video, a couple of them, but one was kind of fun on kind of their touting their strengths. And let me see. Okay, I'll get to it in a second. Yeah, I'll go ahead and load it up. But the fact is that they're moving with this, and as you can see there, I don't know how many they have, but they'll be able to actually mass produce probably a number of components in the future without having to go to other techniques in printing metal components. And they say that the parts will actually be stronger. So they're looking at soccer-sized parts, 100,000 parts per year. So then I did a little research on HP, and they have something called the HP Metal Jet. And not only, I mean, you can put one on, put a down payment deposit, and I think the deposit was like $2,500. So I don't think they're that cheap. Yeah, about $400,000, which I don't have that kind of money. But there are companies that you can get metal jet production. I don't have any idea what they would cost, but you can fill out the order form and send them a step file, I think. What do they want? Or an STL. Create a log account, upload your parts, and then I guess you can find out how much they cost. I do know that working with Shapeways, because they also have the HP printers. These, let's see, I don't have it here, but they have the other plastic ink, or not inkjet. I guess they use an inkjet process to do color, but they have these professional type, and I found that the cost of them are about twice that of their nylon SLS. So I don't know if there's any benefit to it, but if you watch this video, they clearly think so.
One of the challenges in 3D printing is the time it takes to print a part.
Now it is a little corny. So.
Jet Fusion can produce parts 10 times faster than any other technology in the marketplace with strength. This chain link was printed in under 30 minutes, weighs about 1/4 pound. It can lift up to 10,000 pounds. In fact, I'm so confident that we are going to lift my favorite car using this chain link. That's Jake, who designed and printed this chain link. Hey, Jake. Hey, boss. How's it going? Excellent. Hey, is that a 95 Avalon?
It is. You know, I've had it forever. Good eye.
That's my favorite car. Let's do this.
Wait, do what?
Woo. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that. How's it looking? Looking good. Looking good.
So as you
Nice
can
job.
see, a little amusing example there of its strength. But I also noticed, let's see if I can go back.
That's the way.
There you go. Well, it's not very apparent here, but more than likely when they actually printed this, as you're probably aware if you've done any 3D fabrication, how you actually create your layers is important, especially if you're looking for the most strength from your particular part. And I'm pretty sure that they did not print this vertically, layer by layer. They probably printed it horizontally up, which would make sense and could be done, and in order to achieve the strength that they did. But I started thinking about that. I hope they printed that correctly, which obviously they did. So I thought that was kind of amusing. And a little funny, I guess it goes back to the super glue days where the guy was hanging by the hard hat. Okay, so let's move on to the next item. I thought this was interesting, and it looks like I better remove my, don't run on this site, exclude. But it appears that not only have we seen 3D fabrication being used to create concrete buildings, but it's also being used by the Marines now to create barracks. And so they fabricate these in about 2 days. Someone asked the question, well, what about the doors and windows? And obviously that's probably something that's added later. Clearly they didn't wire anything. It does look very crude, but again, doesn't take long. I think it's kind of funny, all the scaffolding they use for this. And if you can tell, the extrusion pattern on the side there isn't that accurate, or maybe as accurate as it can be for concrete, but we're seeing more and more of this, and I think that's kind of cool. And I had some idea of where we could see this in use elsewhere, but yeah, I think this is real interesting. As somebody who's been in the military about 30 years ago, 40, and then some of you may have actually can date me. Yeah, we pitched tents, and so having something that's not actually a tent now could clearly be important, especially if you need to have it reinforced. So very interesting, and look forward to seeing more in this particular area of use and these type of things. All right, so the next item we're going to get into is 3D in medication, or medicine, and there are a few things that I wanted to talk about and kind of revisit some things that I've talked about and interviewed individuals previously on the show, and that is fabricating tissue or organs. Now this one I don't think in particular has to do with that, but what was more important is the surgeon or the researcher who is behind printing the bladder in this, or not or creating the bladder from the person's stem cells. But he's already done a couple of TED Talks, and he's been a little controversial because he's kind of projected that we're going to have 3D fabricated organs sooner than later. And a lot of people said, oh yeah, sure. But the whole point is, in this particular case, this was, as he calls it, hand grown. But we're already seeing it being done for tissue, which are skin, but that's not surprising because tissue is basically a single plane, and something like a bladder, which probably doesn't require the capillary infrastructure, is probably not that difficult to work with either. But what I thought was interesting, I'd continue looking at somebody that we've had on before from Rice University, and it appears they're moving closer now into creating capillaries. And if you remember through this interview, and you can go back, I think it was a couple of years ago, the important thing is to have both the ability to get nutrients as well as waste out of your cellular structure, otherwise it can die. And so they've been working on a technique to create a lattice that dissolves but still leaves the tubes. And so this article really kind of discusses that by using a hydrogel type process. They're able to literally remove that and just come up with the tubes. So, and the person that I interviewed was Jordan Miller. So it's a great little article. The other thing that I thought was great is that they collaborated between, I think this is the one, Rice and Baylor College. And I remember seeing an article how Baylor was moving in a similar direction. So I'm glad to see that some of these universities are teaming up to move forward with it. And this is going to be extremely important. And then TechCrunch talked about also printing organs and sooner than later. And I thought this was a nice little video, and I have it here that I'll go ahead and play. And the reason I think this is important is they use a holographic technique, and I don't know if they describe it, but there's another little video here that shows them printing a cell encapsulation device. Maybe I don't want to do that one, but essentially they can use prisms to split the laser, and then where the two beams split, which is literally how holograms work, they create an interference pattern. But in this case, they allow that particular portion where they intersect together to harden the polymer, and then once it's hardened, then they just drain out the rest of it. And using that kind of technique for tissue seems really cool. Actually, it's building the lattice that the tissue then grows around, I think is really neat. And here we go. Here's the holographic-based 3D produce. Did I have an extra? No, that's on my next slide. But I thought this was kind of cool. There's a little video that shows it being used here, and that shows through this little illustration here how it goes through the prisms and then intersects. And we've talked a little bit about this and a little bit more information. 532 nanometer laser goes through, and then as you can see, there is phase only SLM, and then here's your resin container. So we have multiple beams coming in from your 3 coordinates, and then this is what's created from it. Now, clearly, it's still on a very small scale, but for organic matter, that makes sense, and obviously I hope to scale it up for things that aren't organic. But I thought that was very interesting that we're starting to see more of this, and literally using a full 3D structure in order to create a lattice without having to build layers. And I thought that was kind of neat. And obviously the advantage of that is not having the time sequence of having to build the layers, because it's all done essentially by almost speed of light as you move the lasers themselves on the 3 axes. Okay, so moving on to scanning. This was interesting, and I'm going to go through 3 steps on this. This is to get me to the actual product. I've talked about this before. In fact, I think it was probably the same article from MIT, using polarization in order to enhance your scans. And it's a great little article that you should read up on. And then I've got a couple of videos, because there's a company, and they've got a funny name, Scooby 3D. I don't know why they chose that name. All I can think of is Scooby-Doo. But Scooby 3D is a new, looks like a phone, but it's a polarize or polarization scanning system that they have on Kickstarter, which I'll jump to. And it's already been backed, so they've already met their goal. And a lot of their pledges have already, let's see, we've got if you want to get one, 975 euros. But some of the, where is it at? Down towards the bottom, all gone. The launch day special, which would have provided one in July, already gone. And then June, and then some of the other ones here aren't going to be available to July and August and September of next year. But if you're looking into something like this, I think it's cool, and I've got a couple of videos here that kind of show off how this is done that they created. So let me find them. So we'll do this one first.
The world is 3D, not just 2D. Introducing Scoop 3D. So far, accurate 3D data has been difficult to generate. We were tired of countless hours of working on a 3D model to 3D print what we needed. That's why we came up with a 3D scanner that is easy and intuitive to handle. There's no app to load, no additional computer, no calibration or cables needed. You can scan anything from smaller objects to people and, after scaling, 3D print it. This is how the Scoop 3D works. Focus your Scoop 3D on the object, just like you would when taking a regular picture. Press Start Scan and follow the easy on-screen instructions while panning the object with your Scoop 3D. This way, you can capture the whole object and get an optimal scan result with an accuracy of up to 0.1 mm or 0.003 inches. So far, with systems based on laser lines, your hand's tremor impacted the accuracy of your 3D scan result. Inaccurate 3D data, however, forces you to rework the model or to accept dissatisfying results. This is the past. Our new technology, patent pending, solves this issue. That way, your hand's tremor has no effect on your 3D scan whatsoever. Don't worry about missing an angle. See the orange circles? They turn green as soon as you've got the respective angle covered. You can even go back to any remaining orange circles at the end of your scan to complete your data. After that, your Scoop 3D connects itself to a server via Wi-Fi and calculates your 3D model quickly and efficiently.
In the long run, the technology of Scoop 3D allows for a wide range of applications. You could use the Scoop 3D for pretty much anything. The possibilities are endless. You could, for instance, set up your VR space, place new furniture in your home, or find yourself fitting clothes.
All right, I'm going to stop there. So you're probably wondering, okay, what is the advantage of using polarized light? So there's a combination. They use standard depth determining, like the structured sensor or time of flight, in order to determine the depth from an object. But then they use standard light and polarized light in order to determine the angle of the light itself. And by combining these two, they get a more accurate model. And if you go back, and I'll jump back here so you can see what they're expecting to get for the specification. Now, one thing I did notice, they don't have a lot of actual illustrations or images of their, yeah, I think we have one right here. So we'll load it up in so for a mobile device, that's not too bad. I've seen better with some laser systems. And then here's a dog made of clay. But that's organic, so it doesn't really give me a lot of information on detail, and there's probably a reason for that, so if they're still working on it. And also the fact is that you have to manually move around an object, which I guess is kind of cool, because you don't need to have a precise structure that something has to remain in and then maybe on a platform. So you literally just have to move around the object. And then this is some illustrations of what it'll look like. The scan volume up to 2 meters by 2 meters, so you could scan a human. Accuracy up to 0.1 millimeters. That's pretty cool. And then any material, even specular surface, that's obviously another extreme advantage. and then the data calculations about 10 minutes. That doesn't seem like it would be that much different than some of the photogrammetry that we've used in the past. But the fact is, most photogrammetry still has problem with specular surfaces. The fact that you don't hear, obviously, lends itself to that. And then obviously, be able to STL object or OBJ files is really important as well. So it looks really neat. Now, they suppose they had two different versions, the Scooby 3D and the Scooby 3D Basic. One includes the depth scanner as well as the polarization camera, and one does not have the depth camera. So I'm assuming that, yeah, we can go through here for polarization and photogrammetry. Again, because then you wouldn't have to worry about specular-based items, and reflections, which is a problem in photogrammetry, no longer. And then this version has the time of flight camera built into it so that you have much better accuracy. Here they show it only having a 50 centimeter or 50 cubic centimeters for the Scooby 3D. And then here, as they show you, 320 QMs, I guess that's a European, but the cubic meters, which I think is at a 0.1 millimeter accuracy. That's pretty cool. Now, obviously, there's a difference in price, but $12.99. If you've looked at some of the other Artec scanners, which are 10,000, which I think does about the same amount, and if it can do full color, as they're showing here, here are the different scanners it's comparing to. Of course, you're looking at the structure sensor. It talks about its accuracy, no calibration. Yes, there is a little bit of calibration. For the structure sensor, it's not bad, but you have to calibrate the RGB camera with the structure light. Obviously, that wouldn't be the case here. And a structure sensor does require an iPhone or an iPad, along with the $300 sensor. So, you know, keeping that in mind, you're looking at the minimal of about $600, $700. So even the basic unit's about in the same range. The $12.99 obviously is a little more expensive, but you get better range, better accuracy. So it looks really exciting. I'm just leery of ever doing Kickstarter again for obvious reasons, but especially at that amount of money. But I do think that it is an interesting technology. They've already have a patent, and I'm thinking that it's on how they're doing their polarization, because I have another little video that kind of gives an idea of what they might be doing.
In this video, you will learn how Scope 3D uses polarization for 3D scanning. At first, we are tilting a polarized filter between the lens and the object with a 90-degree viewing angle on the object. The reflection won't change. Next, we try again at a 30-degree viewing angle. Tilting the pole filter now will remove the reflection and you can see through the window. The Scope 3D technology uses this information to analyze the surface of an object. Want to try it for yourself? Head over to our website to play around with our web tool. You will find the link in the description.
So from what I've read on the theory behind this, you have to take samples at different degrees of polarization, and then from there you calculate the best accuracy based upon the angle of incident light. So I'm thinking that that large round object that they show in the front of it, let's see if we can get a picture of it. There we go. This here is basically a very large polarization, probably a circular polarization ring, and it's probably on some type of gimbal and motorized mount so that it can rotate accurately. So you'll probably be able to control it accurately to so many degrees, be able to apply that back into the calculations in the panel itself, which is probably just a standard smartphone or tablet type device, phablet, as they show here, so that you can, I don't know, runs on maybe Linux or Android, and then you basically can export it. And I guess it can be exported through Wi-Fi, And I guess you can also use an SD card or something like that. So pretty neat, obviously very lightweight. I could imagine making a case for that so that you have a handle, make it a little easier than the way they're doing it. So I don't know. I'm going to have to figure out how well this will do. I think that would be a very nice device. And having tried several low-cost scanners, this could be have a lot of potential. Now, I did notice they don't actually show anything being scanned at a very large size. And I've noticed that some of the scans they have, like this one here, let me zoom in, don't look that much better than what I've been able to get with my structure sensor with my 4-eyes lens system. And I noticed there's some serrations here. Again, this is still in beta. I would have to see better models before making that. And again, this is being more of a random organic shape. I don't really know how much of this is the clay and how much of this is actually the artifacts in the scanning system and actually when these were taken. Time of flight should provide some better quality. And if you jump back to my initial MIT article here, they have a couple of illustrations, what happens with the Connect, laser scanner, and then the polarization enhanced depth here. So you can go back and read about that too. So obviously, if they can move it close to that, they should have some excellent results there. Okay, so let's move on to where are we at now? Okay, I thought this was kind of cool, and if you followed this show for some time, this is actually an idea that I thought of doing. In fact, I actually have a little prototype, and if you followed me or actually donated to my VR Miracle that I sent little VR viewing systems to all the children's hospital, about 50 of them in the United States around the holidays, one of the goals was to create an MRI scanner because, one, I had a few MRIs back then. And I thought, wouldn't it be kind of neat to put somebody through that? Well, it appears somebody has moved forward with, I wouldn't say my idea. Clearly, it's something that a lot of people have probably thought about, but it gave me more motivation now maybe to finish that app. But they've created a version actually taking 360 panoramics of the full journey into it. Mine was going to be based in Unity with models, and then obviously recording the sounds in an MRI room in order to apply them. So there would be a little more dynamic capability with my app versus theirs, which is probably a pre-recorded event. But the fact is, you could put this on, and in my case, I just would recommend just lay on the floor because you're kind of like laying on a platform anyways. It's motorized and then moves you in to the tube. And then if you've ever had an MRI, you're already familiar with what I'm talking about. If you haven't, if you didn't think you were claustrophobic, you might find out that you are, because you are in a very close proximity to the walls. It's like a tube, and let's say they show it here. So you don't really have a lot of move to room around. In fact, you're not really allowed to move around depending on where you're getting your MRI from. So you have to remain still. They tell you when to breathe. And then there are some really loud, kind of like knocking, pounding, like a hammer. That's where the coils in the MRI are being, I wouldn't say ignited, being enabled and then disabled, and that's kind of the knock of the magnetic, if I remember correctly, the dissipation of the coils themselves, and they have to basically charge around all the different coils, which are kind of like in a large tube, in order to excite the field depending on what angle, and there's multiple ones that have to be done. So it's like bang, 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 bang. So it's a very loud, and obviously with kids who've never experienced something like that, it can be very frightening. And since they have to remain still, be able to put them into a condition beforehand, before actually wasting the time of the center, I think is a really good idea. And I haven't heard much more about it. It's kind of like they've limited it to this particular study. So I wrote to them and to this person at the end here, said what I had worked on and would be very interested in probably pursuing that a little more. And let's see if I can bring up, let's go out to my Kickstarter. We still have Kickstarter. Out to mine, the one that I had actually put together. So this was a little product I created for kids, if you remember, in the ODVR Junior. But down on the bottom, I have some images of my little demo that I put together right here. And so in this particular version, you could walk around it so that you could kind of get familiar with what it looks like and look in it, as you can see there. And then the next stage is removing the animated character here, and then you lay down, and then it basically animates you so that you feel like you're actually be moving into it. So yeah, I may move forward with that. Okay, so that's about it. Let's see if I've got anything else. Oh, yeah. Next Wednesday, I'm doing a meetup at the local VR place. It's called VR Cafe. So if you're in the Portland or Seattle area, let's say Vancouver, come on down. They're going to provide free time to actually experience it, and maybe some other specials. They haven't really let me know. I'm going to go visit them this afternoon. But they've got 4 VR bays, 10 by 10s, and then one in the back that's a little more secluded, so that if you wanted to bring a client in to show them something, clearly you could work with that. And the other nice thing is that they're all land-based, even though some of the games are you still have to go out to the cloud. Some of the games take advantage of the LAN capability, so the responsiveness, if you have multiple players, is better. But the point I wanted to make is that this location is in the Washington Square Mall, and it appears we're finding more and more probably spaces that can't rent because malls are dying, are now large spaces that can be put to use. And so we're starting to see locations like that being set up for this kind of stuff. So I'm not going to get into much detail, but I think that's kind of a cool way to bring some of these large spaces back into play. And here they kind of talk about all the different ones that are moving in that direction. So if you live in the local area, we've got one. It's at Washington Square Mall on the southern tip of Portland, on the west side of Tigard. And like I said, I'll be heading out today, but the meetup will be at 6:30 to 8 o'clock. And then the time after that will be open to anybody who wants to actually try it out for themselves. They've got 2 HTC Vives and 2 HTC Vive Pros. I've got a YouTube video, I'll put it in the link, that I did an interview with them so you can get an idea of what it looks like yourself. But yeah, really kind of excited to be able to host a meetup there. And what I'm going to be discussing is actually HTC Vive mocap, and we may actually be able to set up a large 20 by 20 space if things work out. Sadly, we're hoping to have the new Vive wireless system, but mine won't come until October. So I do plan to bring my budget laptop for $800 that I created to try it out, but we'll see what happens with that. Okay, on to one item. I'll go ahead and get into this. We're into the VR tech closet how-tos, and this is the second part of my 3D audio. And last 3 weeks ago I talked about this little device here. So I'll jump back to my main screen. So if you look inside here, this is the Zoom H2N with the latest. Actually, it's almost been a year now, but it has the capability of doing 4-channel ambisonic and first order. And the only thing that's missing with it is it does front, back, left, right, omnidirectional, but does not do up and down. So you're missing one axis. But it does a pretty good job of doing spatial. Problem with it, though, is that it's not kind of, and I'll actually take it apart here. It's not really made, as you can see, they use the top of it as an adjustment to determine what mics are being used. And it's a very versatile mic, by the way. So if you want to use it for podcasting, or if you want an omnidirectional mic, or even It has a 4-channel capability so that you can put it in the middle of, let's say, a conference table. So it's a really versatile device. I did mention it was like 250. It's actually down to like 150 now, and maybe even cheaper than that. So it's well worth the money and very versatile. But if you're going to use it for 360 video recording, you either have to put it next to it, off to the side. And so what I did is I developed a case structure, two-piece design that you snap together, and then the top you put your 360 camera, and I've been using a Instant 360, and I'll show you some footage from it. Not real pleased, but you pay, what do they say? You get the quality that you pay for, or something like that. I feel like George Bush now, can't even get my sayings correctly. And then the bottom you can mount to another monopod, and then you can extend it. So this sits about, or stands about the point of your height of your voice. And then the other device sits on top of that. So I originally designed this without that, so you can actually remove this if you wanted to. And I shouldn't have done that, because now you'll have to go inside and tighten it up. But go ahead and take it off. So you can use any monopod, and then there's a bolt inside here, and then you essentially tighten it down, and then you can extend it, or you can mount your 360 camera directly to this. I found having a little bit of an extension kind of puts this closer to the ground so that you don't actually see the bottom of this in your 360 video. So then the other thing that you need to do is, as I discussed in my other one, is set it up so that it does 360, and then clap, or if you've got a clapboard, to synchronize your audio between this device and what comes out of your 360 camera. So we did that 3 weeks ago, how to set it up. So now that we've recorded something, and I actually took this to a wedding and recorded 360 part of it, plus I wanted to test out AmbiX. So we're going to go ahead and look through some demos. But before I get there, I've made some modifications since I've actually used this in the field. And one of the things, if you noticed in my previous show, there is a kind of a rocker arm off to the side here, and I actually couldn't get to that. And if you don't have this all set up, and it takes a little bit of effort to mount it all in this, it kind of makes it difficult. So what I've done is basically, if you look at my design here, changed it so there's now a large area to put a finger to get at the rocker arm, and then on the other side of this, there's a hole that allows you to plug in an additional mic without having to take it off. Now you do have to remove the upper portion of it to get to the rocker arm. So you would set it all up, and then you would mount it back on, and then the record button is still available in the front. So you would just tap that and you're ready to go. And also the volume or mic level is still available through the side here. So the reason that I didn't basically chop off the whole side there is I still wanted some rigidity and structural strength all the way around the curvature, because it has to hold the top into place like that to lock it in so it doesn't fall off. And so that's the changes I've made to it. And also I smoothed out the inside a little bit so that you don't have to do any sanding yourself. Sad thing is, as you can see here, the price is $36.89, and I don't know why I don't have a little markup on it, but it'll probably be about $38. So I don't mark it up too much, and I found the quality with Shapeways is pretty good. If you are interested and you got a 3D printer, just email me and then I'll send you the STLs so you can print your own. Having done that, I would have to say most FDM printers out there leave a little bit to be desired. And I had a version of it done actually on a not a 3D Systems, a Stratasys, and it already broke. So I find the SLS nylon to be about the best and also the best looking. All right, so let's move on to our first item, and I will have to go find my screen. Where are we? Here we go. Okay, so I will move all my stuff out of the way here. So I noticed I've got a couple of viewers out there. Email me if you think my audio is okay. I'm looking at my audio levels and they don't seem to be peaking. The great thing is that I'm hoping that I'm able to move around now and you don't get a fluctuation in my volume level. So I hope that is the case. Okay, so let's go ahead and move forward. You can see me. So I've got a few things set up. So if they're still set up, so one of the things that I want to do first is if you've got a subscription to Adobe and you have Adobe Premiere, how do you set up Adobe so that you can use 3D audio, ambisonic audio in it? And it's the instructions I found in a lot of the Adobe little tutorials leave a little bit be desired. So hopefully I can help with that. So let's go to, let's see, let's go to editing right now. So first you have to import all of your items, but before you do that, you want to set up a project and you want to set up a sequence. And it's very important when you set up your project that you select basically a VR scene. So let me save this one and then we'll come back to it. So let's do this from scratch. So we go to New Project. And then we have this all set up. And then we can hit OK. And then we go to Sequence. Yeah, doesn't give me a sequence. I've already messed it up. Oh, we never close it out. Let's close it. All right. So we'll go ahead and do New Project. And then we can go and do New Sequence. And this is the important thing because what we need to do is determine here where our settings are. So let's go to VR. And you need to determine at this particular point, are you using monoscopic or stereoscopic? And if you're using monoscopic, essentially that's like a Samsung 360 camera. There's not that many stereo. If you have a views, you would use the stereoscopic. Or if you're bringing in content from, let's say, Unity or Unreal, you would choose one of these. But I'm using a monoscopic, and it has a 3840 by 1920. So I'm going to choose that one. And notice you've got two different settings here. I'm going to choose the 3840 by 1920 ambisonic. And what that does is it sets up multi-channel audio. In fact, here's a multi-channel. And so we're going to go ahead and do that now. And so if you actually look at these, and we can do that by going over to our audio, you can see that we have multiple channels. So if I wanted to import, which I'll go ahead and do right now, a audio channel, let's use this one here. So it's being brought in. And then we're going to drag it to our timeline. But notice when we bring it in, it actually brings in all four channels. That's very important because if you don't bring that in, it makes the rest of the process very difficult to work with. So once we do that, we're all set up. In fact, if you don't have to make any other adjustments, we're good to go, and we could actually go out and export this. But let me get into a few other features since I'm in the mixer now. But I'm going to do this in my previous version that was already set up so that we don't do everything again. So let's open up a recent one. Okay, so here are my four channels, and the upper channel that's right behind me is the stereo channels that come in from the Instant 360 camera. And then the four channels below that are what comes in from the AmbiX output out of the Zoom H2N. So remember I mentioned, let's see if I can go back to editing so we have a larger panel. Make that smaller. Make this smaller. So if you notice, there are some spikes here. This is where I clapped. So this allows me, and then we also should have a little visual. And maybe not. There we go. I think I may have already cut it already, so we won't worry about it here. But if you notice, once you have everything set up and use that clapping functionality or a clapboard, then you can sync those up. And also there's a feature within Premiere that you can line those up, and it will do that automatically for you. So put that to use. Okay, so what we want to do now is go over to audio. And if you notice, you've got mixers, but we can also bring in, did I already bring it in? Yeah, called a, there we go. So we have our actual mixing units, and well, where did they go? There we go. So I brought in what they call an effects FST channel, and you can bring these in, and they're located. You can go under special, and it's called Binauralizer Ambisonic. And what that allows you to do is to emulate in your headset the positioning of the ambisonic sound. And the sad thing is they don't actually line that up. So that's one of the disadvantages, and I will have a link to another tutorial as well. So if you need a step-by-step sequence. But the sad thing is you kind of like have to use your positioning of where you're looking, and then if it's off a little bit, which it shouldn't be if you use like my case design, but if they're equal, then it should be lined up. But let's say you have your front microphone, let's say you had it reversed, and so the front was back and so forth. So you would use this, and you have a pan, you have a tilt and a roll. You would use the pan, and you would just set it to 180. And if you notice, I can change that to 180. So I'm 180 off. So that would allow me to reverse my front and back. But let's say if it was positioned looking one way, but you wanted to reposition your camera because the 360 camera wasn't facing properly, or the mic wasn't facing properly, you could alter this here. But again, you have to kind of get that out of where you have your camera here. There is a feature, let's see if I can do it, where we can actually turn on VR video and position it here. And then notice how if I have the groom centered here, that I can see how much of an offset, and then I can actually apply that offset. Now keep in mind, this is the binauralizer. All that's doing is changing it in your headset so that you get a better understanding. What you want to do is, once you have your sound to match it up, let's say it's 6, then you have to go in to the actual channel here, into the effects, and make sure your panning distance changes. Also, if the mic positioning is lower, you might want to angle it up, and that's where you would go ahead and use the tilt capability, and you could move it up, positive or negative. And so that is, you have that capability. Also roll, if you wanted to roll it. So these are your options. But again, this only adjusts it in your headset. So make sure you're running a good pair of stereo headsets with it. And then once you have that in there, go ahead and work with it. But the point is, and notice that I'm on the master channel, so make sure also that you're using your master channel, not one of the other tracks. So once it's set up, because you may have ambix on some other channels as well. So you want to make sure that you have them all located properly. Now you can add this to your individual channels as well if you wanted to. But they suggest using it on the master, but it's up to you. It seems to work regardless of what you want to put it. The only caveat is once you're done with it, turn it off. And so you can probably do it there. And then go back into your effects. And select the channel. And notice down here I have the panner ambisonic. And notice I didn't actually pan it. So if I wanted to, I just can rotate it here. So there's 0. And then if I wanted to go minus 6.7, and then you can also, actually you can't change it there. I thought you could. Close enough. And so then it matches your angle that that you're facing, in this case the groom, so that your audio will match as well. And then once that's done, and I'm not going to go through much more, you just clip it off. If you're familiar with Premiere, you edit it, add what other effects you want to use with it. If you want to control the frequency range, you can do that as well. And then go into export media. And the export media is important because if you don't choose this correctly, then YouTube or Facebook won't recognize that it is a 360 video, and more importantly, it won't recognize that it's an ambix. And so we're going to have to give it a couple of seconds because it takes a while for the encoder to come up. So the point, if you're working with 360 video, well, let's make sure I did that right. Well, let's see if I can bring it up manually. So essentially the export doesn't have to go through the media encoder, but let's see if that helps. But if you want to queue it, it has to do that. There we go. Okay, so once we're in it, we then determine our settings, and it's pretty much already set up for us. So we want to verify it. So there's our video, 3840. And then I normally do maximum depth and then maximum render quality. And then I would go ahead and leave it there. Your target rate, I would go ahead and leave it to wherever it set it up for. And then audio, just make sure that it sees it as as mono, but down here, well, something didn't work. It may have taken the wrong setting, so let me get out of that. Let's go over to my sequence. I had some problems with this earlier, and if you don't have it set up to render it as 4 channels, then the audio doesn't come in. There it is. So channels 4. So once you have 4 channels set up, you'll also get a feature down here. Audio is ambisonic, because what that does is it puts in the proper meta tags, and now we're good to go. So make sure that your sequence is set properly so that you're recording 4 channels per each of your, what do you want to call it, audio layers. And then when you bring it in here, it'll give you the option of using 4 channels. And then you can turn it into or identify it as an AmbiX. If you don't do that, then it only comes out as an audio channel or mono audio channel. Okay, so then go back and look at your video so that we have VR is video is VR. Make sure it's monoscopic if you're not using stereoscopic. If you're using stereoscopic, choose either over, under, or side by side. I normally use over and under, but I found that the maximum size that you can work with is, what is it? It isn't 3840 by 3840, which is sad. So you'll actually have to, or is it? I can't remember now. But what you'll have to do is drop it to the next level, which obviously reduces the quality. So what I've had to do in the past is go to a intermediate format and then take that intermediate format and bring it into FMPEG in order to combine it properly as a 264, or you can start using 265 now. Both Facebook and YouTube work with that, and then there's no problem in using 265. All right, so once that's done, queue it and then export it. And if you're familiar with Premiere, you're already familiar with it. Now that gives you 360 audio out of Premiere. And if you've got a license to it, obviously, that might be the direction to go. Again, the disadvantage is that you can't position your 360 view and hear the changes in your headset. You have to use that binauralizer. So that's, I think, a problem. Unlike a couple of other tools that are kind of like free of charge and I think better, but don't really have the video capabilities. So you could export the sound or tools here, and then you would have to still go to another layer in your pipeline in order to do that. So I'm not going to save that. No. Okay, close that. So let's go ahead and look at Reaper, and we've talked about this before. Essentially, you would bring in your audio channel like you would before, and there is a template for Reaper, and it's set up for, and you can see the little comments here. You can set up an ambisonic B format with the 4 channels. Notice one of the channels, which is the up-down, is dead, but your front, back, side to side, and your omnidirectional are all there. But then you can also set up mono or stereo channels in your 3D audio space as well. And the way that you do that is make sure you have the Facebook 360 spatial workstation VST embedded in this, so you would import it, and then once it's set up, then you would just go to the track itself. I'm going to go ahead and this one's on. If I click on it, it automatically brings up the 360 spatializer. And you may have to bring in another tool to bring in the audio. But what's cool about this is that I can click here and get a 360 view that I can move around. But notice down here, if you can see it, it rotates. So my rotation is moving, and more importantly, if I have headsets on while this is going on, I will actually hear the changes in the shifts of my audio as I move around. So once you're done with that, the position is changed. And then if that's all you need to do, you can also do source roll and other features along with it. Notice they call it roll, pitch, and yaw. And so what we want to do is just change the yaw, and we don't need to change it that much. And this actually just shows my location. Sad thing is I don't see any actual parameters that show me how much of an angular change. But again, you have to go into the ambisonic and manually change it here. So I'll put it at -6. And maybe my pitch was a little positive, but then I can place that and then listen to it as I make those shifts. So it's kind of cool. So once I do that, that adds that to this particular VST plugin. And then all I need to do now is, and again, I could bring in other tracks as well. Then I go down and hit render. And here are some things to remember about render. If you're doing 16-bit, make sure that you select the WAV format, not the WAV64 or the auto. And once you do that, then you can determine how you want to sample. And I would do probably better, would work. And then also make sure that you have it set up for 8 channels, even though you're only using 4. It does send the full 8 channels for the first order ambisonic that you will use in your Facebook. And so you just set it up. Once that's done, and also if you only have a region you want to record, I have one here, you do that. If it's the full thing, let it just do the whole. You can either do, selected tracks, you can do master mix, which we'll go ahead and do. And then you can do time selection or the entire project. And then once you're done, hit render, we'll overwrite, and then it comes up and it shows you as it's processing it. And there you go. But I'm only showing 2 channels. So I think, like the previous one, we can't do master mix. We have to do selected channels, and then we have to make sure we select the ones. And I think I already did that. So you'd have to go through and select all your channels, and then do your no channels. So let's select channels. So you'd select all your channels. Then you would render 4 files. And notice I now have multiple channels now. And then I can hit close. And then I would now bring up the Facebook encoder. And then I would bring in the spatial workstation 8 channels. So I would load it. So let's go to my video. And we'll just bring this one in. And then we bring in our video file. So we'd load that. And then we would encode. And I would just leave these in their default position, but you can change your focus, which you might want to do, but you'd have to play with it. And then you can determine on how you want to send it out. If you're just doing Facebook, you just do Facebook. And okay, so I don't have everything loaded, so I would need a couple of other tools to finish the encoding process. And then once that's done, then it would send it out and it would be encoded properly for Facebook. And then if I wanted to do YouTube or a Rift, or just want to do an audio conversion, which I probably don't need. So if I just wanted to create a new channel here, I can hit encode. Let's just say test. And there we go. So it just goes a short segment. So now I should have a test file that's AmbiX formatted. And then you could, if you wanted to, take this test file and use it in, let's say, FFmpeg on the command line. Just use that as your audio channel and use it with your video MP4 file, and just replace that audio with whatever your 2-channel audio is with your 360 video, and then combine the two, and that would work as well. Or just use the audio encoder. So you have multiple options there. Okay, so sadly, I didn't have everything set up when I put the laptop together, but just add that feature there, which would add the video back to it, and then you'll be able to export it. And that's about it. And I'll close that. I don't want to save it. And that's it for this episode. The other cool thing is if you create your AmbiX audio file and export it like we did at the end there, you can then bring that into Unreal, which is what we're going to talk about in our next episode, is how we can bring these AmbiX files in there. I already have a recorded AmbiX that I used that wasn't edited or modified, but that was basically an ambient file that we'll just throw in the Unreal, and then we'll also bring it into the Facebook workstation spatial workstation, so that we'll be able to add some other sounds into the 360 feel, put those in there and see if they all show up, and be able to turn our head around. So we'll try that next week. Okay, on that note, I will see you in about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on when I have enough stuff to talk about. And on that note, have a nice weekend. And again, if you're in the, where do I live now? Oh, that's right, Portland area. Head out to the Washington Square Mall on Wednesday, 6:30 to 8. We're going to talk about, like I mentioned, the HTC Vive mocap system. There's a couple of them, the Orion system that I mentioned earlier in the show, as well as a plugin that's available on Unreal, which is a little cheaper. It's about half the cost. Actually, it's about 1/3 the cost of the Orion tool, and but it only works with Unreal. And then there's also a free version on Unity. I probably will only talk about the two for Unreal, and also you'll get a chance to actually see it in action if you so desire. Again, remember, you need to have anywhere between 3 to 7 HTC Vive trackers, so it may, in the long run, be more expensive than some other systems like the Breckle system that I've talked about. And so it depends on where you want to go with all this. So in the next episode, I'll probably talk about the different types of motion capture systems. Okay, enough rambling here. I will see you in a few weeks. Bye.